We were taught in school that land is an intangible asset. It doesn't diminish in value, nor does it perish, and it is always there. Yet, for many communities across Africa, land remains one of the most contested battlegrounds across generations, specifically because they don't have access to it. Families have been torn apart, and communities continue to struggle for their ancestral rights. So in this show, we'll explore how the next generation is taking up the fight. I am Fatu Elika Mulushi. Welcome to the 77%. Coming up on the show, we head to South Africa for a street debate on how the country's land reform laws impact the people's prosperity. In Kenya, we find out how the country's tea fields have become a battleground between communities and tea giants. And finally, we climb into the highlands of Lesotho, where farmers defy climate logic to produce high-quality wine. But first, we must acknowledge the dispossession and debates around land rights have unfolded differently across African communities. Our correspondents in Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa tell us about how they've taken shape and how they affect young farmers, business people, and citizens.
Even though we don't hear much about land disputes with former colonial powers today in Nigeria, the effects of colonial land policies are still causing problems, especially for young Nigerians. During colonial rule, land was taken from local communities without their consent. That history left behind confusion over land ownership, and it still causes disputes in many parts of the country. In places like Niger Delta, for example, land that was once used for farming has been damaged by oil exploration that began during colonial times. Pollution has made it harder for people to farm or fish, and that means fewer opportunities for young people to work and grow.
Does colonial land ownership still affect people here in Kenya today? Definitely yes, because for many, land is an investment in the future, and if you don't inherit it, you have to buy it. Now, Kenya gained independence in 1963, and only about 5% of arable land was in private European hands. But this caused huge inequalities because thousands were displaced, especially from the very fertile central parts of Kenya. Two recent documentaries which filled movie theaters show the continued inequalities. The Battle of Laikipia shows the partly armed conflict between pastoralists and former colonial families over resources like water and grazing land, and the second film, Our Land, Our Freedom, talks of the families of the Mau Mau, or the Land and Freedom Army, who fought for Kenya's independence. Many of the actual fighters and their descendants ended up displaced, and the land was divided up between colonial collaborators or foreign companies who now grow cash crops like tea or rear livestock. That said, Kenya's biggest landowners are the political elites, like the family of Kenya's first president, Jomo Kenyatta, and second president Moi, who benefited from the deals they cut with Britain.
Land. It's one of the most important tools of human existence. It's where we lay our loved ones to rest, where we build our homes, and where we get our food from. And that's why land ownership has become such a contentious issue here in South Africa, and something that many young South Africans want addressed. South Africa's land issues go as far back as colonialism. For example, the 1913 Natives Land Act tightly controlled where Africans could buy land. Only 7% of the total landmass was reserved for black people. Later, under apartheid, new land laws were introduced, such as the Group Areas Acts. Under this legal framework, black South Africans were forcibly moved from their homes to townships. They were put in small houses, and these areas had limited services. On the flip side, white South Africans could buy property wherever they want. 30 years into democracy, and the land imbalances remain. White people make up only 7.3% of the population. But according to a 2017 land report, they own half of the country's cities and 2/3 of the farmlands.
We can all agree that the importance of land rights cannot be ignored for cultural and economic reasons. But let's zoom in on South Africa, which made global headlines by introducing land reform laws that allow the government, under certain circumstances, to seize land without compensation. Our very own Edith Kimani traveled to South Africa to host a street debate on whether the law offers a fair solution to the country's long history of land dispossession. Let's find out.
South Africa has a new law which basically gives the government the framework on how they can acquire private property from individuals, sometimes with no compensation. What does it mean for South Africans, particularly young ones? So I want to start with some farmers. And Guguletu, we are on your farm right now. How did you receive the news, or what do you take of this new law?
There is a lot to discuss when it comes to this law. It is very touching for a lot of the youth because, one, it opens a lot of opportunities and a lot of doors for a lot of us, but at the same time, there's a lot in terms of agriculture on how it really does affect, because the minority in our country, obviously being the white people, are feeding us on a day-to-day basis.
So let me speak to Tevi here, because you are the white farmer that is being discussed here, right? So for you, how do you take it? Because the government is trying to sell this as a kind of land reform act, and we'll get to the details shortly. But what's your take?
So the main thing to realize is, I believe that property rights and the guaranteed property rights in a country is part of the constitution. And in every country in this world where property rights has been taken from people, that country has started to become a third world country.
Okay, so coming back to the issue of this expropriation law, I just want to come to you, Bulelwa. How do you see the law?
I think it's important to first set out what the Expropriation Act is not. Mm-hmm. The Expropriation Act has nothing to do with land reform. Now, what this act introduces is that it's a balancing act between the interests of the public and the interests of the landowner. And what it does, which I think is what has gotten people in a frenzy, is that it introduces very few instances where expropriation can happen without compensation.
Okay, Martin here is already shaking his head no. I'm curious to know what exactly you're disagreeing with.
It's not a small list of circumstances in which the government can now seize your property, confiscate your property without paying you a cent. So if you own fixed property anywhere in the country, a house, a business, a warehouse, a farm, and the government says, we think in the public interest we have to take this without paying you a cent, it is allowed to do that.
Okay, so I want to hear from Una here, because your view is actually quite different.
In 1652, when the settler arrived here, from that period up until the period of 1910, the land of our people has been was taken away. So they actually expropriated it without compensation of South Africa.
Let me just bring our global audience into perspective here. The Native Lands Act is what basically was aligned with apartheid. Black and people of color could not own land. And so before we go on so deep into history, you've taken us back to the 17th century. Yes. In that case, shouldn't everybody leave the property to the Khoisan, who are thought to be the native occupants of South Africa?
No, actually, Africa and South Africa, it belongs to the Bantu people. It belongs to the Ngunis. So it belongs to the people of Africa.
What about Tevi here?
We are not saying it doesn't belong here. Now that we are living together here, our perspective is that the land must go back to the chiefs and the state. We are unapologetic about this. Mm-hmm. Land must be expropriated without compensation.
Okay, we'll come to those details later. I just want to get your response real quick.
I believe the biggest problem in South Africa currently is the government. And if they expropriate the land in a blanket way, every portion of land, every hectare of land, do you know how many hectares of land currently the government owns in South Africa? Lying bare and wasted. That was bought from white farmers. If the ANC was in any way serious about giving black people land, I have no problem. They should give black people land. They should get black people to farm on that land. And there's a lot of Bophuthatswana, for instance, is 4 million hectares that's lying bare. If they were really serious about empowering black farmers, they would have given them that farm. They would have given them title deeds. But if there is today a blanket expropriation happening, they will still not give you the land.
Okay, Makoni, I want to hear your perspective a little bit, because you are also of the opinion that this is not at all about land reform. So if it's not, what will be?
No, I absolutely agree with Bulelwa and Martin that this is not about land reform. I think that is the issue with the land reform system as it currently stands, is it's deeply cynical about providing black people with land. The government doesn't trust black people with land in this country. And that's evidenced by the millions of title deeds that are held in backlogs by the state. That is what I'm speaking about when I say there's a cynical distrust of giving black people access to land.
Okay.
There is a point of contention.
Just before we continue, let me see by show of hands, do you agree with what Makoni is saying? Do you believe, if you believe that the government trusts black people with land, raise your hand. Not a single person. So let me just ask you a point blank question. Do you think that the land rights in this country are equitable across the board? So if you were to wake up tomorrow as a black man, would you be comfortable with the way the laws are?
You can't trust the ANC government whenever they tell you, I promise you, we will not come and take your land one day.
Okay.
They have proven beyond a shadow of doubt over the years they can't be trusted.
All right. Let me come back to Una here. So is it a governance issue or is it a land issue?
It's both a government issue and a systematic issue. There are monopolies out there. It's not easy to enter into the markets. You might be given the land and you don't have resources, one. Or if you are lucky to have resources, you won't be able to get the market out there because there are monopolies which are gatekeeping the market for certain people. And those monopolies...
Tevi is nodding. You agree?
I'm agreeing.
Okay.
But it's not just for black against black people. It's also for small-scale white farmers. The big guys are trying to keep the small guys out.
No, that's incorrect. Racism is something that we must not sugarcoat. We must agree that racism continues to exist in the property sector as a large, whether as a whole, whether it's in farming, whether it's in estate agent, whether it's in mining, everywhere.
All right, but Kukuletu here is not working for a white person. You're working for yourself. So as a young, born-free... As a young, born-free who's trying to empower yourself in this sector, do these realities, are they real for you? Is this what you're going through?
Yes, 100%. I think I always tell my mom that it is so unfair how the amount of work that I believe that we put in here at the farm is never going to match what is out there. And I think it can be very discouraging knowing how this is something that is not very open to everyone, and a lot of us are not very exposed to what is out there. Our knowledge on agriculture as the youth is very, very limited.
Okay. Because I think we've addressed the challenges really well, I'd like to hear some solutions, right? Because I think we can all agree that there's a serious land distribution problem in this country. How do we have access to the land? How do we make it productive and still feel like we're privately owning it? Some solutions, please. Anyone? Yeah.
In 1980, there was 127,000 white farmers in South Africa that was farming the land. Today, there's 27,500 left, and that number is falling. Now, the reason of that wasn't because of the government or expropriation or anything. It was because of the farming industry being so difficult. It is extremely difficult. I have to tell you, a lot of farmers are just going bankrupt. And if a white commercial farmer that has a history, that has all the knowledge, goes bankrupt, what chance do a young black farmer that has just received land have to make it a success? So we need to ask, for the very same reason that white farmers go bankrupt, young black farmers or black farmers don't succeed. It's the same thing. It's for the same reason. So you need to ask yourself, why is that?
All right.
So the government is the third biggest owner of land in this country. About 24% more is held in trust. Some of that are tribal trusts. Tribal trusts are land that's held in trust that are administered by chiefs, which are basically government administrators. If the government removes that land that it's holding and gives it to people, then I think there'd be a lot of less pointing at fingers at who's actually holding the land and who's gatekeeping.
Okay.
If the government did the right thing of giving that land away.
All right. Gugu, I'd like to give you a chance to close this debate for us. If you look at your projection 20 years from now, you're really incredibly young, 21. What do you want for this country, especially now as a young farmer?
I really want to see myself in a space where I'm just as successful as the next person from hard work and, the dedication that I do have towards the industry. And I can only hope the same for everybody that we are training here at the farm, so we can go back, 20 years down the line and see them also, having their own businesses, their own agricultural businesses, doing something, acquiring land as well and being given equal opportunities.
Well, thank you so much. I think that's a brilliant space to end this conversation. It was really about expropriation. Will that resolve the land problem here in the country? I think everybody here says absolutely not, but it's definitely a good place to start the conversation. Thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you for a great discussion there, Edith. But this debate has been blowing up on our page. You guys have had a lot to say, so here are some of those comments. Alan Scrooby is saying, now this is what we need in South Africa, all to start talking. Then we can resolve everything and compromise with each other. Sorrel Vision, if all complex issues facing society were covered in this manner, we would certainly find solutions. I am so impressed and so proud of everyone who took part. Finally, Kanta, hopefully the government can formulate a way to get people into agriculture through training and support. There you have it. Remember, you can catch the full debate on our YouTube page on DW The 77%. Now, let's head over to Kenya, where land struggles are closely linked to powerful corporate interests. As the world's third largest tea exporter, Kenya's highlands are filled with fertile tea plantations, often controlled by foreign multinationals. But young Kenyans are fighting to reclaim this land and forge a new future.
5% of the land in Kericho, Western Kenya, is occupied by what used to be the Lipton Tea Estates. Today it belongs to Browns, the world's largest tea exporter. Mercy wants that land back.
We grew up hearing what our fathers say, that their forefathers used to have land here, but they were forcefully evicted and the colonialists took over the land.
Mercy is an agribusiness owner from Kericho. She's part of the Kipsigis community. Her ancestors once lived on the land, now controlled by Brown's Tea. She's visiting a community elder, James B., a man who spent his life working and fighting against the plantations. He eventually managed to buy back a small plot near the estate. Kenya is the world's third largest tea producer. Kericho County is one of its top regions for the crop. Nearly 80% of the county is controlled by private tea companies. Tea arrived with the British in the early 1900s. But first, they removed the Kipsigis through mass evictions and massacres. Hundreds of thousands were displaced. Mercy grew up hearing how it happened.
The war story that I heard was the massacre that was done in Sotik Highlands in 1905. More than 1,000 people were killed and they just shoot on them.
Those who weren't killed or exiled were labeled trespassers, forced to work on European farms and later the tea estates that British businessmen introduced in the 1920s. Since then, many Kipsigis have worked as tea pickers on plantations that multinationals are unwilling to sell back. For Mercy, their refusal means leasing farmland for her business 90 kilometers away, which cuts into her profits.
If I didn't have to pay to lease the land, I would have more profit and the cost of production would be lesser. If we are leasing the lands now, what about our generation, the next generation? Where will they go? That's the painful part.
Young people like Mercy are under pressure, not only from lost land, but also from tea-picking machines, which are faster and cheaper than the human workers they replace. With no land and no jobs, many are leaving. Others are resisting, clashing with guards, and even torching the machines. Mercy joined the 300,000-strong Kipsigis Community Clans organization with the goal of fighting back. The organization wants to prevent violence. Their goal is to buy back the land and use it to build schools, community-run banks, and tea cooperatives.
Every Kipsigis person, every child of those people who are chased away from there are victims, including the unborn.
Mercy's group raised funds and matched other bids to buy the former Lipton estates. But Lipton sold the land to Browns instead, a Sri Lankan firm with British colonial roots. Clan members say their offer was ignored, and the sale went through without their consent, a direct violation of Lipton's own sourcing policies. Lipton did not respond to our request for comment. While they made formal offers, the Kipsigis believe the land is already theirs. They've gathered maps and letters from the colonial era that they say prove the land was illegally seized, a position that Kenya's National Land Commission has endorsed.
Why was our own request rejected? Why treat the Kipsigis people like they're less of a Kenyans?
For now, she continues working with her elders, learning how to reclaim the land piece by piece. They share one dream: to bring Kericho back to its people before the plantations and their machines push the next generation out.
The desire to preserve something for the next generation is one that we can all relate to at some level. And when it comes to land, it's a particular yearning that's hard to replace. So let's look at what happens when land is passed down to the next generation. We head to the mountain kingdom of Lesotho, where one family is bottling resilience and turning it into wine. In a region once dismissed as too harsh for viticulture, the winemakers at Sunny Wines are proving everyone wrong.
This is not Burgundy or Tuscany. This is in Southern Africa, but is not one of South Africa's world-famous vineyards either. Instead, we are in the mountain kingdom of Lesotho. It's difficult enough to grow good vines at this altitude, which reaches 1,790 meters above sea level. Adding to the challenge is Lesotho's rainy season, which begins in February, exactly when the grapes are ripening. These factors haven't stopped Kananelo Thamai and his Sunny Vineyard team from growing high-quality Pinotage and Chenin Blanc grapes here.
The fact that you are able to grow grapes and take those grapes, bring them into the cellar, process them into a finished product, which you can actually enjoy thereafter, is a reward itself. So our winemaking process is constantly being modified because of the resources that we have, because of the location where we are.
With world-famous wine-growing regions already suffering from climate change, viticulture is rapidly changing. But this shift presents an opportunity for Kananelo and Lesotho's nascent vineyards.
Because of that altitude, we have a relatively cooler climate, which enables us to have grapes that have a good natural acidity, and that is good for the longevity of the wine.
Before, seedlings were grown here at Sunny Mountain Vineyards for a government-supported tree planting initiative. A chance visit from a South African vineyard owner on vacation led to the first experiments with around 400 Chenin Blanc vines.
In 2008, they shipped in a consignment of 400 vines of Chenin Blanc. And then it is those Chenin Blancs that they guided us how to plant them, how to nurture them, how to trellis. And then in 2012, we got our first from those vines that they brought. We got our first 200 kgs of Chenin Blanc, which were then taken to the Western Cape, where they were vinified into our first 50 bottles. And then it is those 50 bottles that were used for analyzing on the labs, for tasting with people knowledgeable about tasting wine. And then the outcome that we got was very much positive.
If that was their chance, the Thamai family grabbed it.
Our wines was tasted and it got very positive remarks from a renowned wine writer, Miss Jancis Robinson. She's a British wine writer. Apart from that, on an annual basis, we are given a chance to showcase our wines along other wineries at the annual Lesotho Wine Festival.
And wine aficionados know a good bottle when they taste one. For Paulo de Freitas, director of the Lesotho Wine Festival, Sunny Wine's consistency is testament to the skill of the farmers growing the grapes.
Given that the production is very limited, on only 30,000 bottles, and the extreme conditions that these wines are grown in, we also need to be very happy that we get at certain seasons, I guess. But you know, we're partnering with many different groups, locally and internationally, to try get these wines to as many wine drinkers as possible.
And for Kananelo, that means a new challenge, tilling the soil and upping production.
We need to address the challenge of little production. At least above 25,000 liters, we can be on a stable production where we can supply a little bit more stores and even be able to export.
Through weathering heavy snowdrops, extended drought and heat waves, Sunny Mountain Vineyard has literally put Lesotho's wine potential on the map. Cheers to that.
Today, we've heard how history, power and law collide on this issue, and how young Africans are reclaiming their connection to ancestral land, questioning ownership and imagining its future. Let's continue the discussion on our social media pages. We'd love to hear from you. I'm Fatu Elika Moloshi. Thank you so much for watching.